This is Steve Renfro again. I've got with me today Dr. John Hassell, who grew up here in Moss Point. And John and his brother Doug were two of my closest friends growing up, so I know some of the stories, and I hope he doesn't tell any on me. So, so John, thank you for doing this today. What do you remember your earliest memories of playing just sandlot sports? Just what kind of games did you play growing up?
Well, first of all, Stephen, let me just say I thank you for doing this because I like to share stories about Moss Point and about growing up here because it's just heartwarming to me to go back and remember some of the good feelings I had growing up in Moss Point and on Beardsley Lake here. A lot of stories. We probably don't have time to get into all of those. But early on, our influence was down Torres Street, up Danceford Street, up the hill on Danceford Street. We just had a lot of friends, and as Stephen said, a lot of folks gathered around here, and we played all kind of games. Of course, we didn't have many new toys. We had to make our own toys. But one of the games that Stephen remembers, and I remember well, was a game called Kick the Can, which originally was you stacked up a couple of cans, and you had somebody that was it. And that person had to stay in a ring around those cans and close their eyes until everybody went out and hid. And then the person who was it went out to see if they could catch somebody and find them and beat them back to the cans. Well, if they beat you back to the can, then they could kick the can and you kind of started the process all over again. So it evolved from that point to hit the can. Everybody had a stick or a bat, and which sort of evolved into a very dangerous sort of situation because if you were running back and you had to grab the cans and said 1, 2, 3 on the cans, then if they hit those cans before you could do that, then you were still it. So that involved, and we would have maybe anywhere from 5 to 15 people playing at the time. And usually we played it around dusk. And we had a lot of places to hide around here, a lot of bushes, a lot of trees. The next door neighbor many times didn't live there, and we had an empty house over there. So there were a lot of places to hide. But it was just a great game, and despite the danger, but it was a lot of fun. We also played games like hide and seek, which is similar. We had all sorts of baseball games, everything from home run derby, which we used tennis balls, to sock ball, which we'd make out of a sock, and we'd have a very small field to play on, but that was a lot of fun. And then, of course, we had all the games with football in the yard, baseball in the yard, basketball with an old goal tacked up on a pecan tree, and just a mud court that we had. So it was all a lot of fun. And of course, we had all the fun involved in the lake being here. I got a boat when I was about 11 and a motor, a 12 horsepower motor. And believe it or not, we could actually pull skis because we didn't weigh but about 100 pounds at that time. But we skied out, and we also had what was called a surfboard. And we skied and pulled surfboards around the lake out there, and we did everything from set trot lines to fish to going up the river and jumping out of a tree at Brickyard Bluff, which was dangerous. There was a big bluff that was probably 15 to 20 feet high, and on top of that bluff was a big tall tree that some people had nailed boards. You could climb up in that tree and jump out of it into the river, which was probably 10 feet deep. And we were jumping from 25 to 40 feet high. And of course, that was dangerous too. But we had a great time. Luckily, I'm not aware of anybody that got seriously hurt.
Let's transition to organized sports. So what's your earliest memory? Maybe baseball, your first organized sport?
Probably, I played 1 year of, I guess they call it minor league. I was about 8. I had not had any direction as far as how to catch a ball, throw a ball, or anything like that. But I remember playing that one year, don't remember much about it. But when I was 9, I remember we had to try out for teams. And we had to go out in the field and catch fly balls or catch a ground ball or throw. Because I was different from everybody else because I was left-handed. And I had a limited number of positions I could play. I could play outfield or first base. Well, I wanted to play shortstop or second base because that was where everybody else wanted to play. I didn't want to play catcher. And at that particular time, I didn't want to pitch. But I went ahead and I think I played that year. I played right field. I remember Pete Campbell, who is about my best friend now, one of my best friends for sure, was a 12-year-old at that time, and he was a pitcher. And I struck out 4 times against Pete pitching. Those are the things I remember about the 9-year-old. And then next year, we had a different coach, and I had gotten a little bit bigger, and I played first base and started pitching a little bit. And then later on, pitched for another couple of years. And my last year in Little League, we won the championship. So that was fun.
What Little League team did you play on?
Wilkerson Freight Line.
Wilkerson Freight Line.
And that's the one Doug played. Yeah. I will tell you a little bit about that with Doug because I was a 12-year-old and I was a pitcher and first baseman. And Doug was very, very talented as a young boy. He was our shortstop, which usually is reserved for one of your better players. And he was, as a 9-year-old. He was probably our best fielder. But even as a 9-year-old playing against 11 and 12-year-old boys, he batted about 250 that year and was a contributor to the fact that we won the championship.
Wow. And
then went on and played Babe Ruth baseball. And then I didn't start playing basketball until I was probably in 7th grade.
Seventh grade?
7th, 8th, and 9th grade basketball, and then, of course, high school basketball.
So what sports did you play in high school?
In high school, I played, we'll start with football. I started out in spring training before my sophomore year, which was in my 9th grade year. Coach Hammond decided that he wanted me to be a quarterback. I had not played quarterback in junior high, so he brought me out there and showed me the fundamentals of quarterback play. And I did play that spring training and played in the spring game. And then in the following year, I was second team quarterback and played defensive back. Started the year as a defensive back against Biloxi. And Jackie Sherrill was their fullback at that time.
Really?
And they had a really good team, but they beat us like 18.
So this your sophomore
year?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in the middle of the year, we had some shakeup among our players. There were a few players that decided to leave the team. And I think Coach Holmes, Bobby Holmes, decided he wanted to change things around. And this was probably with 3 or 4 games left. We'd only won 1 game that year. And he decided he wanted to put me at quarterback and put Jimmy at end. And by the way, Jimmy was an exceptional athlete, big and strong, and later ended up playing offensive tackle at Delta State. But he also was our center in basketball. But anyway, we changed things around. We lost some of our better players. And I think he was beginning to look down the line and trying to develop a team for the following couple of years. So I played the year out at quarterback and defensive back, and we didn't play well at all. But the next couple of years, we got a little bit better each year, and we won a few more games every year. And then, so I played 3 years of football at Moss Point at quarterback and defensive back. And then I played basketball, made the basketball team as a sophomore, lettered that year. I was not a first team guard at that time, but I played enough to letter. Same way as in my junior year of basketball, but my senior year played the whole year. And we had a decent team. We won about half of our games. We actually did beat Pascagoula that year in a district tournament, but they beat us more than we beat them. So that was something we remember. And then in baseball, Coach Hammond also was instrumental in getting me to play first base for the varsity team. when I was a ninth grader, right before or right after spring training football, our first baseman at that time was Tommy Seaman. Tommy was an outstanding baseball player, an outstanding athlete. Tommy was high jumping or broad jumping, and he broke his arm. And for some reason, Coach Hammond decided he was going to bring me up from the B team to play baseball as a ninth grader on the baseball team. So I was able to move up and play the last 3 or 4 games on the varsity team. So I played enough to letter that year. And
what position did you play?
I played first base.
First base.
And that was what Tommy played.
Right.
When Tommy got hurt, rather than bringing someone else on the team up, he brought me up off the B team to play first base.
Right.
So played that year, and then went on to play three more years in my sophomore, junior, and senior year at baseball at first base. Pitched a little bit, but we had a couple of good pitchers, so I wasn't the starting pitcher, but I was a starting first baseman for those next 3 years.
What pitchers do you remember on that team?
The pitchers I remember when I was a senior was Jimmy McLeod. Of course, Jimmy was an exceptional pitcher. He actually pitched well, and we'd played against each other since Little League, but luckily we got to play on the same team, and even later on in American Legion baseball and in semi-pro baseball, Jimmy and I played on the same team. But I remember him being one of our pitchers. We didn't actually play very many baseball games. We probably played 10 games in about maybe 2 games a week for 5 weeks when the baseball season was over.
Right.
Ernie Wells was a sophomore my senior year. Ernie was probably our best pitcher. He was a really good pitcher. So I pitched a little bit when I was a sophomore, and Coach Williams was our baseball coach, and for some reason he decided and said, "Now, John, you can either be a pitcher or you can be a first baseman, but I don't want you to do both."
Huh.
And I said, "Well, I'd rather play first base because I can play every game."
Right.
So I played that, and so he didn't want me to pitch anymore. And actually, we probably had pitchers better than I was.
Right. So what about football? So what stories do you remember, specific games and events in football either?
Well, by sophomore year, I think I scored 1 touchdown my sophomore year because I only played in the last 3 games against Hattiesburg, and so I guess that was a moment that I will remember. But we didn't have a particularly good team, and we did not play well.
But you were quarterback.
Yes.
So what did they call the play, or did you scramble and
I scrambled a lot. But we were playing some of the best teams in the state near the end of that year. Laurel had one of the best teams they'd ever had in history. They were state champions that year, and they ran out about 85 players onto the field. And they were undefeated and were listed as one of the greatest high school football teams in history, not just in Laurel.
So let's make sure we know what year this is. So
That
you graduated in '64.
But
So this would have been the
sophomore year was the football season of 1961.
61?
Mm-hmm.
That's when Laurel was so good? Yeah.
Oh, they were really, really good. And then Pascagoula was very good that year. And Gulfport was very good that year. All 3 of those teams. And we had to play Laurel and Pascagoula near the end of that year. And it wasn't even close.
So Montport played in the Big 8 conference, is that right? And
and I'll make a comment about that. Back in those days, we felt like, and it probably was to some degree true, we sort of felt like the redheaded stepchild of the Big 8 conference, particularly the South Big 8. We had probably the worst facilities. We always, particularly those first years I played, we didn't have a very good team. So we kind of felt like we could have been better, but maybe we weren't. But I couldn't complain about our coaching. Our coaching was good. We had a lot of enthusiasm on the team. And as we progressed through the years, we got better and better. And I'll say this about Stephen and Doug's team. From the time we started, in Bobby Holmes' first year of coaching as a head coach, was the 1961 season. I think that year we were 1-9, and then the next year we were 4-6, and the next year we were 5-5, and could very well have been 7-3. Lost a couple of close games. But then a couple of years later, the team that Stephen Renfro and Doug Hassell and Bruce James and Jimmy Miller and several of those guys turned out to be one of the best teams that's ever played at Moss Point. That's a historic team. And I was present at their game against Pascagoula, which has been noted several times, and was played in a rainstorm. And by all rights, Moss Point should have won because Pascagoula got ahead in the first half, and then the bottom fell out, and it was a slush bowl the second half. And there was a high snap. Moss Point did score in the second. In fact, I think Doug scored the touchdown. And then the extra point was in a rainstorm, and it flew over Doug's head, and he picked it up and threw a Hail Mary pass to Jimmy Miller and caught it at the goal line and scored, which, if it had been today, Moss Point would have won the game, but it was still a 1-point conversion if it was a run or a pass, so it ended up a tie. But that was one of those games that even people that didn't see it heard about it, and it's still a historic game.
I've talked to a lot of Moss Point people about that, and all of us have the same feelings that you just expressed. I've also talked to a lot of Pascagoula people about this same story, and they don't want to hear it.
I'm sure they don't. I'm sure they don't. Well, I will say this. When we played Pascagoula my senior year, we did win that game 17-14 on a field goal by Robert Wells. And that was pretty momentous for us because, as I can recall, we had not beaten Pascagoula in a number of years. We'd never beaten them in junior high and never beaten them in high school football for a number of years. And so that was pretty momentous.
And that was the same.
That was 1963.
63. That was the same day Kennedy was killed.
November the 25th, 1963.
Yeah. So we talked earlier about a Brookhaven game and maybe one other game. I know maybe that's not your favorite memory, but I think it's a story worth telling.
I hope I can remember it correctly, and I may have to look back and maybe have other people relate that. But it was a painful memory for me because I think it was our 4th game of the year, and we had lost the first game to Hattiesburg, and we were actually ahead of Hattiesburg at halftime. But they came back and beat us in the second half, and I think they beat us by about 26-9 or something like that. And then we went, and the previous year, Biloxi had won the state championship my junior year. So we were playing Biloxi in the second game of the season, and we're playing at Biloxi. And we did not know that we were good or not. We thought we had the potential to be a reasonably good team, but we went over there against Biloxi and beat them 39-0. And they had won their first game against the Louisiana team. And we were going to Biloxi with them being number 1 in the state. And we weren't even ranked.
Wow.
But we went over there and beat them 39-0. As it turned out, they weren't all that good. But we did beat them 39-0. And of course, we realized at that point how good Mike Switzer was. He was our running back, and he was first team All Big 8 that year as a junior. And I was lucky enough to I scored 2 touchdowns in that game and 1 touchdown pass to Mike. And then we went later, and I think we lost a very close game to Laurel. Then we went to Brookhaven. And that's a very painful memory, as I've told Stephen before. We had, I think they had scored first, and then we scored, and I don't remember what quarter it was, second quarter, third quarter. But then there was a bad snap from center, and Robert Wells missed the extra point, but I don't think it was his fault. It was just the snap was not good. And so we were down 7-6, and it was near the end of the game. It may actually have been the end of the game. I don't remember. But I remember we drove the ball down the field, and we were inside the 5, possibly on the 1 or 2 yard lines. And the rest of the story is, I'm not sure I remember it correctly, but this is the way I remember it. Coach Holmes called timeout, and we went to the sideline, and with just a few seconds remaining, went back in there, called a quarterback sneak, and not realizing that the clock started with the official's hand signal. I thought it started with the snap of the ball. And I went up there and we ran a quarterback sneak, got good blocking, went in and scored what we thought was the winning touchdown. And the clock had run out before the touchdown was scored. And I've felt all these years that was my fault, that I should have known that the clock started with the hand of the official and not with the snap of the ball. But anyway, it was a gut-wrenching loss. And sometimes you remember those things more than you remember the good things. But we went on, and Butch Jones and I played quarterback off and on. He probably played more than I did the rest of the season. And we did have some good wins. We beat Pascagoula that year. We beat Biloxi. We didn't beat Gulfport because they were the best team in the conference that year. But I think it was the beginning of a process where Moss Point gradually got better each year under Coach Holmes. And but anyway, I think we had a lot of respect for our coaches. We felt like our coaches were good, and we felt like they prepared us well.
Yeah. So you finished high school and went to Mississippi College as pre-med. You played baseball at Mississippi College too, right?
Yeah. I actually went to Mississippi College not knowing what I wanted to do, and because somebody had told me, well, you can't go wrong if you starting out in accounting. Well, I did that for 2 years, and I played baseball for 2 years and didn't particularly like accounting. And so I came to a crossroads in my life, probably after my sophomore year. I knew I didn't want to do accounting, but I thought I wanted to do something in the healthcare area. So I thought about physical therapy, or dentistry, maybe medicine, but I had to start over as far as the required courses. So I played baseball my freshman and sophomore year at Mississippi College. And then, because of my academic requirements for pre-med, pre-dentistry, I had to take a lot of lab courses. So they did not make allowance for any athletes. If you miss practice because you're in the lab, you just miss practice. So I decided at that point that it was more important for me to pursue what I thought would be my career. And I did that. I went ahead and quit playing baseball at that time. But I enjoyed playing baseball at MC. It had good coaching there.
Well, I think you chose well. You went on to be a very successful doctor in Laurel. So there's some story about Don Sutton. I think we could get that on. That'd be great.
Okay. Well, when I was about, I don't remember if it was my freshman or sophomore year, Don Sutton had already signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers, but he was going to school part-time at Mississippi College. I think he had started out, I may be wrong about this, but in either a junior college, he was from North Florida, and I think he might have started out in junior college in North Florida. But since he had already signed with the Dodgers, he couldn't play baseball in college. So when he would come in the off season, he would come and, of course, he pitched batting practice for us some, and he played intramural football against us. And I'm sure the Dodgers didn't know he was out there playing intramural football with his arm. But I can remember taking batting practice from Don, and gosh, he had the sharpest curveball you ever saw. It was just an unhittable pitch. And he knew how to place it. He knew how to hit the corners. And we knew even then, before he had ever made it to the Dodgers themselves, he was in the minor leagues at that time. We knew he was going to be a star. He was quite a pitcher.